GM closures go into effect. Senator Sherrod Brown says there will not be a 2020 run for president in his future. And also, we are tackling the most important question of the day. What is the best Girl Scout cookie?
It is a very important question. Team Rising will answer it. They are here with us in studio. We've got Democratic strategist and former comms director for Andrew Gillum, Jeff Bergen, and Trump 2020 Advisory Board member Mica Mosbacher. Jeff and Mica, great to see you. Thank you for being here. And Crystal, first on our hit list
Let's
is
start off with Manafort.
Mica. Paul Manafort's going away for almost 4 years. He cheated the government out of some taxes. He's going to pay $25 million in fines. He may lied a bunch, wire fraud, but really all the different charges are around the effort to try to hide money and steal money from the government.
True.
He's going to prison for a while. People are saying this isn't long enough. I think they need to look inward a little bit at the corruption of their souls if they really think that Paul Manafort should go to prison for 20 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, Judge Ellis is a no-nonsense guy. He's an independent thinker. He was a naval aviator, and he was tough on the prosecution at times.
He was.
And was criticized for that. But he is a Reagan appointee, has an impeccable record, and the Eastern District, from what I understand, has, adhered to lower sentencing, except in drug cases where it's higher than some of the other districts. So, I think that there's a whole different issue at stake here if we want to talk about inequities.
Right.
And that's a separate issue.
Yes. Right, that's not Paul Manafort's fault. It is a real issue.
Exactly.
Agreed.
It is an issue, but that is aside from what happened with Manafort. But, a lot of people don't realize is that Paul Manafort was an advisor to Reagan, President Ford, as well as George Bush. And full disclosure, I know Paul, my husband, who was Secretary of Commerce under Bush, worked with Paul Manafort as well. He had a really good reputation. And so people ask why, he went to work for Donald Trump for 3 months as campaign manager. Why was he chosen and why wasn't he vetted? Well, he had these references that were hard to argue with.
Yeah, I think one thing that rankled people here, Jeff, well, there were a few things. One was that the judge said that he had lived an otherwise blameless life, which when you look at the years of corruption and foreign influence peddling and hiding millions of dollars and hanging out with Russian oligarchs is a little hard to swallow. The other thing that is hard to swallow, which Mica alluded to, and I agree, I am not lobbying for Paul Manafort to spend the rest of his life in prison, and I think that's gross, people who are doing that. But what is also gross and disgusting is that this guy, who is white and wealthy and privileged and well-connected, gets a slap on the wrist when someone who's got, a possession charge gets the book thrown at them, who are predominantly poor and black. And that is disgusting. But I am not mad about Paul Manafort getting a light sentence. I am mad that others who should be shown leniency are not.
Jeff?
Look, just under 4 years for defrauding the government. If Manafort's principles are so high and mighty, why defraud the government? Turns out he's not.
I don't think anyone thinks his principles are
right. But that was part of the defense being given for him. And so I think you have to ask yourself, a guy who has spent his time fronting for strongman dictators around the world, who has a long record of pretty questionable decision-making when it comes to political campaigns that he's a part of around the world.
Factor into his sentencing if it's not illegal?
But he's not. He's not living a blameless life, and I think that's where I think.
The otherwise blameless life thing.
Right. Well, he's talking about from a criminal justice perspective, not are you a great guy? Do you take your kids to the baseball game? Perspective.
Do I want to see Manafort get 24 years? No, but I think 4 is light, considering that Judge Ellis once upon a time gave Congressman Bill Jefferson from Louisiana 13 years for financial white collar.
Was that a corruption? I don't know the case.
It was a congressman in Louisiana who had cash in the freezer.
That's right, the cash in the freezer.
That's what I thought. I didn't want to go there because that's why I was thinking.
And the congressman got 13 years from Judge Ellis. So how is it that Paul Manafort, for sums wildly exceeding what Dollar Bill Jefferson did, gets just under?
Our criminal justice system is not.
Crystal and I actually agree.
It's not equitable.
We agree on this point,
and we all agree on that point.
But it's tough when you line up these cases because quid pro quo corruption tends to be punished severely by federal courts as a general matter because they really want to make a point about that and how it undermines the whole system. But 13 years sounds like a long time. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, but there's also the part, Mica, that he's not done yet. I mean, he also faces sentencing in D.C. and the judge in D.C., whereas Judge Ellis in Virginia, very skeptical of the prosecution, almost out of line in some of the comments that he made during the trial. The D.C. judge had a very different take on this case.
Yeah, absolutely, and is known for coming down on the tougher side of sentencing guidelines.
Yeah, so let's wait and see what we end up with here altogether. Jeff, meanwhile, and this story kind of hits close to home for me because I used to live in Ohio, not too far from this Lordstown auto plant. GM is closing. It's been there for a long time. A lot of jobs lost. 5,400 workers affected. You know, it's really a kind of iconic place there in Ohio. Does this, you know, I remember back when President Obama was running for re-election and it was, you know, bin Laden's dead and GM's alive. That really meant something in the Midwest, in Michigan, in Ohio, in Wisconsin, in places that are obviously electorally critical. Does this symbolism also impact the 2020 election?
Look, in 2012, we had promises made, promises kept. You heard right out of Vice President Biden's mouth a number of times. 2020, we're going to have promises made, promises broken. We've got 5,400 workers out of a job. We've got, you know, all kinds of families just, you know, asking themselves, how are we going to do this? I mean, you're talking about TAA assistance. I mean, you know, TAA assistance for so many of these workers doesn't mean anything. Meanwhile, the Republican Congress, at the direction of the president, gave windfalls to the big corporations, executives, and people flying around in their private jets. Promises made,
Are you talking
promises
about corporate
broken.
tax reform?
Yeah.
I mean,
at the end of the day, like we're talking about this is, you know, this is a window into the re-election. Promises made, promises broken. He said that
we could talk about Mica. Should we talk about how Ratner decided to? I'm trying to find the proper word for TV. Mess over.
TV, so you can say whatever you want.
Screw over the bondholders at General Motors in order to do a giant bailout of the auto workers unions, which was obviously a very important constituency for Obama Democrats. Violated contracts to do it, though. Violated the actual letter of law because they could, because there was enough political will to do it, and they didn't do a GM restructuring the way that it would have been done in the private sector. They did it to make sure that the auto workers' pensions would be kept intact, even though they were unsustainable over the long run.
God forbid that you take care of workers.
Well, no, listen, the United Auto Workers in Detroit have pushed back and have already condemned GM for these decisions because they felt like they were benefiting from the president's and the previous tax cuts in 2017, and that they are now, during this period of time when auto sales are up 0.3%. They are punishing the workers. And even Senator Brown, who is from Ohio, said this: GM received record tax breaks as a result of the GOP tax bill and eliminated jobs instead of using tax windfalls to invest in workers.
Yeah. Well, this is also, I mean, there's a bigger story here that's not I mean, it is a political story, but it's not about automation, which is a real issue we've got to deal with. But Mica, just on the politics here, I mean, the president back in 2017 went to Youngstown, Ohio, very close to this plant, and said, don't move, don't sell your house, the jobs are coming back. That's going to be a hard thing for him.
Well, I go back to the CEO, Mary Barra. She made these decisions to restructure the company. Apparently, auto sales are down, SUVs and trucks are up. They weren't equipped to handle that demand in the marketplace, first of all. And then secondly, apparently they're going more towards software in these cars or in these trucks, and they are laying off engineers, and they need more computer coders. So, you know, that was a management decision. I think it's tough to blame it all on Trump.
Mica brought up Sherrod Brown, senator from Ohio, who just got reelected pretty handily in a state that in large part has been moving against Democrats. He's decided he is not going to run for president. I am surprised, both because I've been in touch with some people around him who seem to think that he was going to run, but also because I think he had a pretty strong case to make about his appeal and his electability. Were you surprised by this, Jeff?
I was. You know, folks close to me had been, you know, certainly loudly saying that he was going to run, and I think that the Democratic Party needs voices like his. I mean, I think at this point we have Senator Klobuchar is the only statewide elected Midwesterner running for president. We need more of the Midwest. I mean, that blue wall, that's where we get reelected.
Right.
My background's in Florida, and I'd love us to win back Florida's 29 electoral votes. But at the same time, you can't ignore that upper Midwest blue wall.
Right.
I think we need more candidates like Sherrod Brown.
What is Florida looking like these days for Trump and Democrats?
It was interesting. The other day, a poll came out saying Trump was in deep trouble in Florida.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't really buy it.
Obviously, I'm a Democratic partisan, and I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Florida right now is Trump country. 66 of 67 counties in the 2016 primary against Marco Rubio. We just ran a very, very tough race against now the governor. We now have a U.S. senator. Look, I think Trump's going to pour everything they can into Florida. It's a 1% or 0.5% state any given year. Candidates have strengths, candidates have weaknesses. President's going to have weaknesses in the state. I don't think he's in trouble. I think it's just going to be very, very competitive.
We can't underestimate the Mar-a-Lago effect either. I mean, the ramifications of Mar-a-Lago throughout that state for all the folks who. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
it's not really a thing.
You're like crazy.
Oh, okay, all right. It's not really a thing. The Mar-a-Lago effect.
The fact that he has ties there.
No,
probably helps him. That's a real thing.
That is a real thing.
He doesn't campaign in Mar-a-Lago. He campaigns in Pensacola. I think that's part of the smart strategy for him. I think we've got margins.
People also had been thinking that because of the change in the law that just went into effect, where now felons will be able to vote, that this would be a huge benefit for Democrats, because traditionally people with felony records are more likely, I think it's 3-1, more likely to vote for a Democrat if they do vote. But actually a lot of people who are touched by the opioid crisis or were caught in, whether it's selling or possession or anything, who have felony records, and that is a much more cross-sectional, don't really know who we're talking about here, who they're going to vote for situation. So I'm not as clear, but the Puerto Rican community in Florida sounds like it might be an interesting possible demo that might switch things up a little bit.
Look, we're always looking for the silver bullet, what's going to help one party or another in Florida. There are no easy answers. At the end of the day, the Florida Republican Party, the Florida Democratic Party have a lot of work to do in terms of organizing their voters, making sure people get out to the polls. This is a state with 10 media markets, with countless subsection communities, even within counties you think are all blue or all red.
They have very
and there are these weird stories that pop up from Florida that I see in my news feed. I'm like, what is that? An alligator on a jet ski on the highway with a helicopter above it, Crystal? How did that happen?
Only in Florida.
And people say only in Florida.
Mica, favorite Girl Scout cookie? Go.
Mint.
Oh, really?
Mint.
The Thin Mints?
The Thin Mints.
They are delicious. Those are the ones I probably eat the most of. I'm a Samoa's lady myself.
Is that with the coconut in the middle?
Oh, yeah. Those are good.
Yeah.
Those are good. What about you, Jeff?
We'll find some bipartisan agreement on Thin Mints.
Nice. Okay. We've got rankings here, I think. Can we put these up? Oh, no. Do we have rankings? Did we get rankings? No. We'll just assume that we're right.
I'm just looking at these.
There we go.
What are the other options? I don't have that
S'mores,
much.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, do you realize
Tagalongs are good. Trefoils, those are gross. Do-si-dos, gross. Lemonade's gross. Thanks a lot. I don't even know what those are. Toffee Tactics? Is that a real thing?
That's a new flavor.
New flavor.
Well, what's interesting, too, is I used to sell cookies door to door.
I bet you did.
I
back
can see
in that.
1968, 69, cookies sold for 50 cents a box, which was interesting. And then we didn't have any of the apps. Now you can go to a cookie app and you can put in your zip code. I put in this zip code. The closest place to buy Girl Scout cookies is at the metro station.
There you go. Pick some up on your way out, guys. Thank you.
Thanks
Great to see you both. Happy Friday. Enjoy the weekend.
Likewise.
Coming up, our old pal Buck is going back to the bar.
This time with current Congressman and former reality TV star Sean Duffy, we decide that it's time to stop being polite
and start
being
getting real.
Coming up.